What's been the story this summer with Charger camp?
Well, I think it's mostly been Kellen Moore and a new look offense that I think a lot of fans were disappointed with last year under Joe Lombardi and sort of mimicked the Drew Brees Saints under Sean Payton. And we all know that Justin Herbert and Drew Brees share very little when it comes to physical characteristics. I think the processors are about the same. It's one of the great things about Herbert and why he's mentioned as a potential best quarterback in the league is he matches those physical gifts with an incredible ability to process and make his way through all the progressions quickly. So there wasn't as much sort of push the ball downfield, take advantage of this incredible arm strength that Herbert has and ability to really put the button or put put his passes on a button. And I think we've seen quite a bit more of that. We've seen aggressiveness downfield. Josh Palmer has been a big beneficiary of that. That's sort of been another storyline. The third wide receiver, if that's what you want to call it, behind Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Is it going to be Josh Palmer? Is it going to be Quentin Johnson? They both do sort of different things, but Josh Palmer has really had an exceptional camp. On the flip side, been sort of the cornerback conversation about J.C. Jackson, who missed most of last year. He had surgery right before the preseason and then just wasn't quite right when he returned finally, and then got hurt, very shortly thereafter. So that secondary with the return of J.C. Jackson, their big free agent acquisition last year in the offseason, to go with Michael Davis and Asante Samuel, and someone who really emerged last year in, kind of spot duty when pressed into it, Jasir Taylor. So those have kind of been, I think, probably the biggest storylines of everything that's been out there.
Is there more? I mean, I'm predicting Niners Chargers rematch of Super Bowl 29. I really think I'm bullish on the Chargers this year, as well as the 49ers. That both teams have to have some things go right, and most notably health. But how much pressure? There's tremendous, Shanahan and Lynch have pressure here, but they also are well thought of, maybe compared to the last previous regimes. How is the Southern California fan, the Charger fan, feeling about Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco? I'm a big Telesco fan. Is there more pressure on one than the other? Are they a tandem? I know Telesco doesn't have a lot of playoff wins, and he's been there for a while, but he's an outstanding personnel man.
Yeah, I think I'll separate it into two categories: the fan and and ownership. I think ownership likes both quite a bit. The fans, I think, are a little bit frustrated. They feel like it's a Super Bowl caliber roster. I do think now there's probably more pressure this year than any year, not just because it's year 3 for Brandon Staley or, for as long as Tom Telesco's been here, but just the way they treated this offseason. And, there was a lot of speculation about who might have to be let go in order to make room for this Justin Herbert contract that we knew was coming. And instead of releasing Keenan Allen or Khalil Mack or some of those pieces that they thought were set up to move on to other spots just because the math had to work somehow under the cap, they pushed the money. They pushed it to next year. So it's clear when you do that and you ask Dean Spanos to cut, tens of millions of dollars in signing bonus checks to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and, to the Bank of Bosa to push that stuff down the road, it signals you expect to make a run this year. And they were able to pay Herbert. And that's one thing about this front off or this ownership group that I think gets lost. And I'm not just trying to be a shill as someone who's an employee, but I think they took incoming in San Diego for frugality, and that just can't be said anymore. They made Joey Bosa the highest paid defensive player in the league when they did his extension. They made Derwin James the highest paid safety in the league when they did his extension. They just made Joey Bosa the highest paid player in NFL history when they did his extension. So clearly Los Angeles has given them the ability to spend money on this team. And between last year's free agency period and this off season, pushing money into the next year, I think they clearly believe this is a Super Bowl caliber roster, and they expect to make a deep run into the postseason.
Is there a player down there that's making a lot of noise? I know the Washington State linebacker Henley had a great game last week against the Chargers or against the Saints. Is there a story or somebody that we should be looking for tomorrow night?
Well, it's been a great rookie class. All of them have really stood out. Now, Quentin Johnston has had issues with drops. And that was the case at TCU. It was the one knock on him. I mean, if it wasn't, there would not have been any controversy over which would have been the first receiver drafted. He's a physical freak. I mean, he's an absolute giant that can fly. He's just had some suspect hands, and that showed its face in the first preseason game against the Rams. He dropped a third down pass from Easton Stick that should have been caught, and then he was able to break free on a go route and drop the ball that was kind of put right where it needed to be. So he, has kind of been working through that. He's been great with the media and said, look, it's just concentration. I need to be more aggressive. And he was able to bounce back last week, caught every one of his targets. So outside of that, though, you mentioned Henley. Thule, I don't think is going to play. Tui Pelotu's been exceptional. They've been looking for depth at that edge position, and he has looked fantastic. In the joint practices against the Saints, he was absolutely wrecking shop in the one-on-ones. And really showed out this past week as well. A lot of pressures, relentless. That's going to be a big one. And then, you mentioned Dayon. He was the best player on the field of either team in preseason game 2, just everywhere, shooting gaps, getting a sack, tackles for loss, tracking guys down sideline to sideline in the pass game. He's going to play. He's going to end up playing on Sundays. I don't know what his role will be, but I think if, Kenneth Murray can't kind of live up to his billing as a first-round pick, which he has not done thus far. It's why they declined his fifth-year option. Then I wouldn't be surprised to see Dayon start taking reps from him. And also, he's one of those sort of Derwin James-like queen on the chessboard where he can play some safety. He can play linebacker. He can play that dollar position that Brandon Staley likes a lot that'll afford Derwin to be able to rush the passer, to play high, that sort of thing. So we're going to see him. And I think, the other big name that's really stood out, and who knows if they did it in back-to-back years, they got Jamari Sawyer in the 6th round, and he became their starting left tackle when Slater went down. But in the 6th round, they got Scott Matlock out of Boise State, the interior defensive lineman. Man, he has been a force. He is strong. He sheds and has been making tackles at the line of scrimmage for stuffs, some tackles for loss. He's going to play. He's going to be in the rotation. I don't know what kind of snaps we're going to be looking at on Sundays, but he also is going to make an impact. And I'll give you one more. Undrafted free agent Gerard Clark out of Coastal Carolina has been an absolute force. He's got to probably clock in at like 350, 360. And he's kind of been that hockey assist guy. He's just collapsing the pocket, and you're seeing those edge players, the Carlo Kemps, the Blake Lynches, get these sacks. And a big part of it is the pressure that Gerard Clark has been putting just straight up the gut.
Do you see it at all the way I see it, that this could be the Chargers' year? I mean, I know they went 2-4 in the division last year. We all know about Kansas City, but Kansas City can't win every year. And I just see I see San Diego. I see the Chargers as a team on the rise. You already kind of referenced a couple of their impact rookies. Could you picture a run to the Super Bowl in Vegas this year?
Well, I think everybody can say this, but they just have to stay healthy. I mean, I think, Larry, if you were to offer the Chargers roster to the 31 other teams in the league for their roster, I don't know how many are saying no. Kansas City because of Patrick Mahomes, but obviously it starts with the quarterback. So if you feel like Herbert's better than your quarterback, you're probably going to make that anyway. But I mean, when you kind of start going through it at every level, at how Zion Johnson's going to be a monster this year. And you're going to have the left side of that line with Slater, who I think can get in the conversation as the best left tackle in football.
Yeah.
To Zion, to Corey Linsley, who's in the conversation as the best center in football. That's kind of where it all starts there. And then on that defensive line, Bosa said he feels like he has been in the best shape and he has felt better than he has coming into camp in 5 years. You pair that with Khalil Mack, who still's got some juice left. You get to the secondary level, and you got J.C. Jackson and Mikey Davis, who really turned out last year when he was pressed into duty with Derwin James. And then on offense, obviously the pass catchers to go with Austin Eckler. I mean, you've got a roster. You've got everything. So I think there's no excuses except for Kansas City. Kansas City they lead in the fourth quarter seemingly every single game, and they lose the game in seemingly every single game to this Kansas City Chiefs team. They've got to figure that out. It's pretty hard to get to the Super Bowl as a wild card, which means they are going to have to figure out that Kansas City Chiefs riddle, and they just have not been able to do it. They've been close. They've got the lead in fourth quarters. They've got the lead at halftime. They've led in double digits in third quarters, and they just can't get over that hump. So they're going to have to do that this year, if they want to make that Super Bowl run. I just think it's awfully hard to do as a wild card.